Hello, fellow cool kids. How's it going? So I created a more accessible version of some of the parts of the dissertation that could maybe inspire our work. So I'm going to share the screen. And now you are seeing the words if you want to read along, and there are some images, but here we go. From the Introduction to Funds of Knowledge in Carceral Secondary Mathematics Learning, which came out this May 2022, the section that's called Anchoring Anecdote, an eighth is 3.5 grams. I will never forget the day, a few days before conducting my research, that I learned an eighth of an ounce. Oh, I messed that up. Hold on. I'm going to start again. I will never forget the day, a few years before conducting my research, that I learned an eighth of an ounce equals 3.5 grams. This day pointed me to my research purpose. This purpose was to reveal variations in the way teachers think their students' knowledge and experiences from outside the classroom can transform carceral mathematics learning. These days, anyone can ask Siri to work out the weight unit conversions involved in ounces and grams. Since elementary school, I have been literate in and skilled at using formal mathematics language and tools to do unit conversions, equivalent fractions, or whatever formal mathematics language someone could use. So when I say the first time, I do not mean the first time I crunched the numbers to make 3.5 grams equal an eighth of an ounce. I mean the first time I saw students who often claimed to want nothing to do with math were actually doing a lot of math in their free time. By this statement, I mean I learned most of my students were using math with a particular vocabulary and with such regularity that they assumed everyone knew it. This knowledge gave me the idea to propose research in an area few researchers have even theorized: math instruction in the carceral secondary setting. The day I learned an eighth of an ounce is 3.5 grams, a student I will call Zach, all names of people and places have been changed except my own, was messing around in the back of class. I was not sure what to do about it. Despite having just turned 17, Zach was already insisting he could not graduate and just needed the General Education Development GED book. I'm not allowed to give GED prep material to students who are his age. So there he was, day after day, just messing around. I wanted to have a private conversation with Zach, so we stepped outside the classroom. I tried to coax him into looking at a chapter involving fractions and unit conversions in an algebra book. He took one look at it and said, "Yeah, I don't do that. I don't fuck with fractions." I marveled at the way he had said it. It was the categorical statement of the conscientious objector, like how someone might refuse pasta by proudly proclaiming they are not eating carbs. While what he had definitely not said was, "I don't know how to do fractions." I explored this stance with him. When I asked Zach why he did not do fractions, he described always failing at fractions, algebra, all that stuff, and stated, "We just don't get along." It was like he was describing the dissolution of a toxic relationship, and I did not want to mess with his serenity. Human to human, it did not seem like a cool thing to do to someone in that space. However, there was some panicking going on over in my space. Without the algebra book, Zach would continue to mess around, and I would be under more and more pressure from the guards to respond punitively. But even if I wanted to sneak him the GED book, I knew I was passing the buck because someone who did not, quote unquote, fuck with fractions was certainly never going to pass a test that included quite a few fractions. At least if he was working towards high school credit work in the classroom, I could scaffold. But I wondered if I could really scaffold short of just giving him the answers to the tests. Like many teachers in carceral classrooms, I was assigned to a classroom, not a subject. It seemed impossible, or as someone with an English credential, I certainly did not know how to catch someone up on fractions, negative integer subtraction, algebra substitution, and the various and sundry elementary and middle school skills needed for just one problem. I wish I could remember exactly what came next. Maybe I had picked up how students talked about eighths the same way I had learned to never say the triple digit number 420 as 420, because its association with April 20th and cannabis culture meant the class would break out in hilarity. Maybe there was an actual 1/8 in the book. Regardless of the provenance, I was trying out a fraction problem and had asked, what's an eighth plus an eighth, with no response. Then I do remember I used these words, what are 2/8? Quick as can be, Zach had answered 7 grams. My confusion gave way to curiosity, and I stated, what do you mean? Zach tried to explain it to me. He had a thrilled grin of glee, like he was proud at being the teacher, but also like we were sort of getting away with something. He explained he knew 1/8 of an ounce is 3.5 grams. Thus, 2/8 are 7 grams. I had exclaimed, oh, so now you're adding decimals. I had the rest of the students each doing different work to get to. But what was very clear to both of us that first day was that Zach did, quote unquote, fuck with fractions. It was easy to agree we had come up with a plan for me to support him on his last credits. Without knowing it, I was trying to follow a funds of knowledge protocol as I took what I learned and reflected on it. Translating it into school world's math language, I finally set it up in a way that made sense to me, using the unit conversion of 28 grams to 1 ounce. Zach had memorized, but I had to look up. I could not get over how many learning objectives and topics went into this moment. Ratios, unit conversion, equivalent fractions, and proportionality are all key elementary skills on which algebra is built. Woo, 2001, 2009. I started surreptitiously asking students and found out it was commonly held knowledge. I wondered why my students were running around doing conversions. I knew it had something to do with cannabis. I recognized the delight in reactions I was getting as the same delight as when they would start reciting weed strains, or if I had actually accidentally written April 20th as 4-20 on the board. I wondered what kind of situated learning had led to this unit fraction conversion mastery. Finally, I concluded customers order drugs like cannabis in eighths, but scales obviously do not measure in eighths. Thus, when selling, the seller has to weigh out in grams. It seems 1/8 is a common retail quantity costing about $25 to $40, which is the most many kids can come up with at once and is enough for a day of personal consumption. 1/8 has entered everyday vocabulary in the cannabis world the way people use the technical unit of a quart, because that's what you're going to get at the store if you don't want a whole gallon. The more I learned, the more I reflected on the role of language and context. I grew convinced there were specific ways to talk about math in the student's primary discourse, defined by G. 1996 as language to which people are apprenticed early in life during their primary socialization as members of particular families within their sociocultural setting, page 137. When I had asked what is 1/8 plus 1/8, I got a blank look from Zach. Crucially, when I switched to ask what are 2/8, he popped out the answer reflexively. Language was highlighted repeatedly as I explored this topic. Once, about 6 months after my conversation with Zach, I was using 1/8 to explain multiplying fractions. When faced with the problem on the screen, the students were stuck or answered it was 1/4, or 1/8, 2/16. However, when I said, what's half of an eighth, a student I will call Josiah said 1/10. I paused, straining to fit his words and my formal mathematics together. When I thought I had figured it out, I almost yelled out a yes. I confirmed with him, to multiply fractions, you multiply across. Thus, the answer is 1/16, which he was calling 1/10. Josiah literally jumped up, which you're not really allowed to do, and facepalmed. He then called out, "You're blowing my mind right now, Miss T. Oh my God, I'm never going to be able to smoke a blunt, cigar wrapped with cannabis or other drugs, without thinking of you." I recognize people would call it inappropriate to have students talking about doing drugs in class. However, I also instinctively felt it had to be a triumph to have broken down the divide between school, where he had often told me he felt unhappy, to the outside space where he felt at home. My dialogue with Zach eventually led to him letting me work with him all the way through his algebra credits. Beyond credits, by sharing his knowledge, he paved the way for Josiah and many after him by proving it was possible for students and teachers to work together to remove affective obstacles and academic ones. Other knowledge I have tapped involved the geography of Mexico and the United States, popular culture texts like the television show The Office, and everyday realities like being evicted, with which they are all too familiar. However, no zone of knowledge seems to wake up the students who seem so truly checked out, except for what I started referring to in my mind as 420 fractions. Despite some clear potential, I was not able to explore much further. I found myself without a community with which to develop protocol for navigating the complicated issues involved in connecting 420 fractions to the classroom. Following Zach's lead, I searched for a framework that could help support my questions. It turned out that, in a way, I had it with me all along, which I will explain in the next section. Except for, we're not going to hear the next section because it's so long. But in the next episode, I will be giving you some research questions and some literature review stuff, both as an example of what research questions are, which we're going to have to come up with, oh boy, and also what the literature review section is like. Okay, congratulations if you made it to the end. And Kitty in space says bye-bye.